Hey everyone, my name is Longfei and I work with a Field Builders team. And before we started the Field Builders team, I working with Filecoin as a dev role. So basically, just working on the open source contribution, and then just getting people to like from the community and then from other part of the world to contribute on Filecoin and to build on top of the Filecoin track. Thank you.
All right. And our next panelist, have a seat. Come join. Be cozy. Is Dave.
Yeah, hi. So, why am I here? I'm the old guy in the room. I've been in open source for 30 years, I think. Yeah, roughly. Let's see. In my career, I've worked on Second Life. I was at Mozilla when Anuba was probably involved with Mozilla. It's like 2014 to 2017, 2013. Yeah, so anyway, we probably crossed paths actually at some point. I used to do developer onboarding for like the Mozilla like community engagement stuff. I was on the security team, but you're a nerd who can talk to people, so go ahead and talk to people. I've worked at the Linux Foundation. I got involved with, I've been involved with Bitcoin since the very beginning, but got involved with Protocol Labs, let's see, last year, 2013. Or 2023, geez. Working on libp2p. And so now I help do all the community stuff for libp2p and for DRAND and several other companies, groups in the PLN. And we're quickly diversifying outside of the PLN as fast as possible. Anyway, so yeah.
All right. Awesome. So I have a couple questions here for you all. And Longfei, I actually want to start with you. And this relates back to what we were talking about earlier in the APEC room when we were talking about that. And you were talking specifically about how in different regions, there's, kind of a different threshold for what open source is and how open source works. And you were specifically talking about China and how it's WeChat, but you're limited to once a week. Could you maybe touch a little bit on what different communities kind of view as open source?
Yeah, I mean, like that's a topic that we talk about in APAC because, I'd be honored to be able to work with you guys from around the world for PR and the Filecoin Foundation. At the same time, I was born and raised in China, so I know that the culture of how it's been working in China. And open source community is not a huge community in China. So most of the companies are still work on the closed source and then working out for a bigger corporation and then getting not like as open as we love to do in the world. And especially now for me working in Web3 and then with Filecoin. And before Filecoin, I actually work with another blockchain company. It's called Neo Blockchain. It's like Chinese company, and from that job, I was doing some of the developer community strategy. So it's really tough for me in the China region to get people are like willing to contribute an open source project and without getting paid regularly for a job. And also like a lot of things are kind of confusing for them because like what are we going to do for this open source project? And then are we be able to do that for like 6 months or a year? And like, is it going to be based on the interest driven or like the income driven? So that's a lot of different things happening in China. And
in China, do the companies that do closed source see any value in coming together to work on an open source project as a common standard for interoperability so that they can sell more software? Like, that was the pitch in the United States, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, was like, look, we're all going to just agree to use this open source standard, this implementation like Apache or whatever, and that's going to allow us to interoperate between our different platforms. So like our cloud platforms we can transfer files between them. And so then, yeah, we're still competing, we're still making money, but we all now can offer a better product to our customers because we've all agreed to use this standard. Like, how does that work in China? I'm
I'm not too familiar with the big industry in China because I spent most of my career in Web3. But like from the Web3 perspective, we see more and more this coming out, especially like when more and more people are building and working with Web3. They get a sense of like, oh, we're building this protocol that we use or building this tool that we use is super valuable for this kind of a feature in this ecosystem. They are willing to take it out to contribute, and then getting people more involved from the other part of the ecosystem to use. That's what be happening with Web3. And then more and more people are like not contribute open source, but like open source their project for the other community to use. And we're still growing on the side of like, as an individual, you want to contribute to open source, and that's something that we just need to keep growing. And look at the PR Dev Guild. There's like we got a lot of Indian folks there because that's another side of the world that we need to learn. Like in China, we are growing that. We have to push more aside of getting people to work on open source software community more.
All right, awesome. And actually, Dave, you touched on something that I want to ask a little bit more about. I know you were around for a lot of the early days of open source contributions, especially in that Web 2, Web 1 realm, even back in the day when, you went to the library and the screen was black with like green letters. How has open source, do you think the culture around open source developers and what they value in projects changed over the years? Have you noticed any change, or do you think it's pretty consistent?
That's a really good question. Has it changed? There's a heck of a lot more money involved. So, yeah, I think early on everybody did it because, like, there weren't a lot of companies. To be honest, there were a couple of really big ones, and I'm talking prior to Web 1.0, right? So like 1996, there was a pretty healthy open source community, and most people did it just because they loved computers, right? It's like, oh, let's play around with the internet, But then the first web boom happened, and everybody realized that you could make a ton of money, and the open source stuff was our only option for pushing back on total corporate control, right? So like Microsoft would just come in and buy up a handful of companies, corner the market on something, and we'd all be screwed. Because you couldn't interoperate without reverse engineering their file formats or whatever. So yeah, I think the expectations of what developers put in and what they get out has changed over the years. It started off as a hobby. Now it's your resume. Now it's your entree into, working for Google or working for a big company if that's what you want to do. It has taken on, it's always had a political angle, right? It's always been free speech, free as in beer, free as in speech, right? So there's always been a political angle. But now I think people see it as, okay, I'm a kid in college. I want a job afterwards. One of the great things that the Web3 has done that is brand new is these retro funding programs like PLDG. What I'm trying to do with proactive funding of young developers learning open source. And so now you really have the opportunity to get paid to do it. And so I don't know. I think people, if you're learning computers in college, it's probably the best thing you could do in your summers and your nights and weekends is to just get involved in an open source project, because your GitHub is your resume now. Like literally, I have gotten jobs where they're like, just what's your GitHub handle? It's like, here it is. They're like, okay, you're hired. Like, wait, no interview. And they're like, that was the interview. It's like that movie Gattaca where they just check your DNA. That was your interview. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, that's a very long answer. But the things that haven't changed, the politics, the leveraging of open technology as a pushback against corporate and government control, that has always been a thing. But now people can get a lot more out of it. Like you could actually make a living as a journeywoman, open source developer. Like I know people who don't work for companies. They just do grants and they do contracts and they work for me as an open source developer working on community stuff. So I don't know. It's a lot better now. I'll tell you that. It's a lot better. Yeah. So
Yeah, I think nowadays for sure people are a little less mean than they were like 15 years ago. Where like you were just like a kid on the internet doing some like open source contributions and you'd get like the worst comment on GitHub and you'd be like, okay, never mind. So that's been a really good change, I think, for sure. And Longfei, kind of jumping to you as someone who is on Phil Builders and working a lot on bringing more open source developers into the ecosystem. What is something you have found has been really successful in bringing in more developers into this ecosystem for open source projects?
I think what's been super helpful, for the past I've been working with Filecoin, there's two things that has been very, very helpful for us to get more builders to willingly contribute to our Filecoin. The first is when we have FVM launched, and we also at the same time we launched the request for startups and looking at how we can build programmable storage and like what is data DAO and what is the data ensuring is and what the components or the infrastructure that we need to FVM is missing. That's been super helpful for us to onboard more builders willing to build this because we have a clearly requirement for them to come in and contribute. And they can look at this request for a startup or request for tooling and see if matching what they can build. And that's being super helpful, means having a clear scope of work we need and you giving a clear information or message to the community what you're looking for. And that's being super, super helpful. And that's also applied to what PRDG is doing right now. And PRDG gave us a lot of tons of help from the communities, and that's being super great, which means have a very good, valuable, ongoing program to get people identify that open source contributor willing to come and have a mentor and have the process of recognize the contribution and getting people on board. I think those two are super, super valuable to help us to onboard more builders. Is like very clear requirement what you need to do and a good program to get them on board. And I think the PRDG focus helped us a lot, not just for the past a few months, but even in the Hack House as well. They just like contributing a lot. They can sit down and work with archive team and work with our team to just ship a good full set and ship an on-ramp integration. So that's very, very nice.
All right. Thank you for this. And shameless plug here for PLDG. Both of you work on projects where you have PLDG members also working on projects as well. Have there been any PRs or any work that's been done that specifically sticks out to you as being incredibly valuable or something that you are like, this is a really great example of an open source contribution?
So I work with both the DRAN and the libp2p teams doing the community stuff. And when the PLDG, when you guys came to me and said, hey, we've got all these developers, I went in and grabbed as many as I could. I just went in and barked orders like, you're working on this, you're working on this. And they came. The one thing that stands out the most, and I'm just like, libp2p is a networking library that's used on a lot of blockchains, a lot of platforms, right? So like Filecoin uses it, IPFS uses it. But it's also used in other things like Optimism, Polygon, Parity, a lot of other companies outside of the PLN. And so we have implementations in like 10 different languages, but most of the projects that use libp2p use either Go, JS, or Rust, right? There's one project that has always been kind of special to me, but has been dormant for a long time, was the Python implementation of libp2p. And so when I came in to take over the community this year, I made it my personal goal to revive Python libp2p. I was successful in recruiting Paul Robinson from the Snake Charmers out of the Ethereum Foundation to be the maintainer, and I promised him to get him to volunteer. I promised him I'd find him help. We were able to we have like 4, 5 PLDG members working on Python libp2p. They cut the first release of Python libp2p in 4 years, just 2 months ago. They brought it all up into modern standards. It runs, it compiles, it runs against all the tests. And the PLDG people have really breathed a lot of life into this project. And I'll tell you why it's important. There's a lot of people in the PLN, right, in the Filecoin ecosystem that are providing things like distributed compute distributed data for AI platforms, AI applications. Well, if you looked at all into AI, you know that Hugging Face is like the center of that universe. Everything revolves around their platform and their integration and everything. I started getting people early on this year asking me about Python libp2p because all of Hugging Face's stuff is in Python. And I was like, I don't. But now we do. And now it is happening. And all because of the PLDG people who came and, we can do pings, we can do identify, we can do all of the basic things now. So the possibility of integrating the Hugging Face platform with all of the Filecoin stuff and all of the distributed AI orchestration and data platforms is becoming real. And so we now, as a community, as a Filecoin community, actually have a play in the AI space. Like, we've been working on all this infrastructure, but nobody could talk to it. Literally nobody could talk to it because you couldn't do it from Hugging Face in Python over libp2p, which is what everything we build uses. And so now that's real. And it's taking off thanks to the PLDG, actually. So yeah, that's the huge win, right?
I actually have two. So one is very, very similar to what your Python example is Filecoin.js, which is an old JavaScript library for Filecoin to be for Filecoin builders to create a wallet, assign transaction, and then even to create a storage deal on Filecoin. And that was the focus before FVM. So on the Filecoin's onboard data, helping builders to build a pipeline to onboard data. So a JavaScript library for Filecoin specifically is very useful. And then after that, we switch focus on like, okay, now we onboard a lot of data. We want to those data to be able to like useful. And then we bring FVM, we bring IPC and the computation in there. And then once the smart contract landed on Filecoin, people are focusing, oh, this is EVM compatible. How are we going to build a DeFi? How are we going to build the data now? And at the same time, we kind of forgot about Filecoin.js because it's like ETH.js, Web3.js is being usable on Filecoin because the smart contract part is EVM compatible. But at the same time, we kind of forgot, oh, there's something Filecoin native. For example, the wallet, like we have different wallet used to be Filecoin native, F1, F3, and only the F4 is the EVM compatible wallet. And when it's coming to like, oh, I want to transfer some token from my EVM compatible address to my existing address, or I want to use my F1 address to participate into the retro PGF, oh, you'd be like, oh, no, shit, it's not working anymore. But like a lot of us already have a lot of side tasks we're working, so we don't have the time to actually go do a lot of that work. And that's a PRDG come in and help us save the time to be able to keep the Filecoin.js up to date, and then at the same time building like a Filecoin MetaMask Snap kind of wallet, so can be able to use different Filecoin addressing there. The send token involves smart contract with that field snap, which now is integrated in the MetaMask wallet. So that's super, super valuable for us, even though it's like fell out of our hands for some time. And then another someone already did upgrade the Filecoin.js and build the field snap.
So Hugo's working on the fill snaps.
Yeah.
Is Hugo working on Filecoin.js as well, or is that banned?
He has to work on Filecoin.js so Filecoin Snap can work.
Ah, excellent.
Yeah. And then that's like keeping things up to date, like valuable tools. Another example is the guy sit here, Shisheng. Shisheng is being super, super helpful, valuable for us is because he started as a hacker. So from hacker's perspective, he actually go use a Filecoin FVM, build a programmable storage. For us, we just deliver the FVM smart contract and we deliver a concept. We know it's not easy to use, but we're not like the person sit on the computer and then experience the pain and then be able to have a better solution to fix that. And so luckily, Shisheng being that around and now being the PRDG, so he knows the pain, he experienced the pain, and he have some solution for us to even build a product on Filecoin, and also giving us a lot of idea or suggestion or how to build like a completely on-chain, fully on-chain storage solution and now he's working with us to extend that Filecoin storage through completely on-chain solution to different blockchains ecosystem, as well as supporting the IPC L2 solution as well. So that's a huge thank you for Shashank. It's a big success for us as well.
All right, awesome. I love all the PLDG callouts. And I know we touched on this a little bit, but I do kind of want to dig into this a little bit more. When we think about, as open source maintainers who are running these projects where you're getting a lot of open source contributors, if you were to give advice to another open source maintainer who is starting a brand new open source project and they want to bring in new developers and they want to ensure that folks can make changes really easily, what would you tell them?
Okay. So my philosophy has evolved a little bit on this one. So back, in the sticks and stones age, we used to just publish our code, and we had this attitude of, if we build it, they will come, right? That does work a little, right? A little bit. But from my experience with Mozilla and the global presence that they were able to build, and then what we're doing now, I realized that, let's see, you need to, I was joking with you earlier, it's a lot like preparing for a summer camp for children. I mean, not saying open source developers are children, it's just that you can't have anything that stops them as they go through that initial journey into your project, right? Anything. Like, you should be able to clone and build and run the tests in like a copy paste, literally, like just, it's right here in my README, copy, paste it into my terminal and hit go. And it better work. And if it doesn't work, you're eliminating like 9 out of 10 people immediately, like that. And then most of the people that stay in a project long-term derive some real value from that project. Okay. And I don't think we've done a lot of analysis on like, what are the kinds of values that people derive from an open source project? Of course, there's like, hey, I've got this other project I'm working on. This is a thing that helps me get there, right? So like Filecoin runs into a lot of developers like, I'm building this other thing that's going to make me money, make me famous, whatever. And I need distributed storage. I need storage contracts. I need distributed compute, whatever, right? But then there's the other developers now that we're starting to see, like with the PLDG people, where it's like, wow, I could develop my career. This could be my resume. This will get me a job with Google or with Microsoft or with anybody. And so I'm going to spend my college years working on open source. So there's totally two different classes of people, although there's a little bit of overlap there. And then there's like people who work for corporations who have an open source dependency or an open source desk, like IBM does this, Microsoft does this, Google does this, where they're paid as a full-time engineer working on some other set of projects, but they're told as part of their job to be a maintainer on an open source project, like one of their dependencies. So those are like the three groups. All three of those respond to the effort put out by maintainers to try to make it easy to work with them. Right? Taking PLDG members and get them to be useful, you have to prep all of your issues, you have to have all your documentation, copy and paste code is the best thing to do. What I'm exploring right now is driving adoption, because open source projects get to a certain size and then people want to be involved. So early on in an open source project, it's almost impossible to attract new developers unless what you're working on is involved with something else they're doing, right? But then you get to a certain size and everybody's like, oh, well, that looks like a really exciting, really it has a lot of impact in the whole global technological space. Like everybody's using the Cloud Native Computing Foundation's platform. Everybody's using Kubernetes. So if I become a Kubernetes expert, then I can, get contracts, I can get jobs or whatever. So you get to a certain size, you attract people by the sheer fact that you are the main thing that everybody uses. So there's two phases, I guess. So what I'm getting at is to get out of the first phase into the second phase, to get from the project nobody's heard of to being Kubernetes, you have to drive adoption. You have to get companies that will use your open source software. You have to get integrations into software. And this gets back to what I was saying earlier. We used to have this attitude of if we build it, people will come. I don't think that that's what we should put all of our energy into. I think we should be proactively seeking customers in terms of people producing products that could benefit from the use of your open source software. And so like what I've been exploring this year is, and I actually have a little joke, kind of a fun demo video I was going to show, but using the wonders of large language models and AI and like refinement. So one of the experiments I did this year was looking back at libp2p, and I can look at the dependency graph on GitHub. So I can find out when other projects use libp2p, right? And then I would look at those other projects and I would find all the handles of all their developers, and I would go back through the history of libp2p, and I would identify the series of events that led up to them adding it to as a dependency, right? So, they forked the code, then I saw a bug from them. There were some questions in the discussions as they were trying to figure it out. Anyway, that can become labeled data in terms of AI, right? So it's like, here's these events, all were correlated strongly with an adoption event. And then refining like a Llama 3.2 model and putting all of our events from the GitHub repos into a Llama index, like a vector database, and then asking the LLM who is currently looking at our open source project and currently evaluating it for adoption. Give me the leads. Who should I go and do sales engineering for? Like, who is it that I should reach out to and say, are you having any problems? Tell us about your project, and actually going proactively to try to gain customers. We don't call them customers because they don't pay us, but they're basically projects that adopt our software. And surprisingly, it works. It actually works. And so what I'm doing right now, and so I started a company, Paper Aviation, to take over doing community for libp2p and DRAND and other projects. And we actually teamed up with Repo, which is also a part of the PLN. They're doing AI orchestration, and providing like the payment rails and all that stuff. So like these models that I'm developing, we could actually license them as an open source project. So there's actually a potential revenue source for libp2p to license this model for predictive adoption and stuff like that. And so anyway, we've been working with them developing this whole product that is actually proactively going to drive the adoption of libp2p. And I'm hoping it'll drive us outside of the PLN for the first time in like a meaningful way, so that we can get a much bigger pool of companies that are reliant on it, so that we have a lot more financial resources we can tap into for grants, for funding, and all this stuff. So anyway, that was a very, very long-winded answer. My apologies, but I'm very passionate about this. I could talk about this for an hour. I think it's time that we start competing in this space like corporations do. Like Microsoft doesn't sit around waiting for people to ask them about their software. No, they do active marketing, they do active lead generation, they do active recruitment. And so I think for us to really blow open the PLN so that we don't have this walled garden effect, and we start getting outside of all of us here and start getting other companies using it and stuff, we need to do proactive things. And so anyway, that's what I've been trying to do this year. I don't know. Helpful.
I think that's a good question, and it's also a very, very good lesson for me to learn. So I can be the one who's been asking question as like, give me some advice as an open source maintainer. I've learned a lot from your conversation. I don't really know what to add, to be honest. But from like a beginner level of the maintainer suggestion, I think what I have experienced is the most is what you mentioned earlier, is easy to fork and easy to maintain, right? So a good example is like, if you want to contribute on Filecoin docs, what is going to happen? So the instruction, everything are not quite clear. So you have to go through to understand like how you want to contribute. How do you write a doc to matching the whole style of the Filecoin docs, and then all this instruction would be very, very valuable and easy for maintainers who want to contribute there. That's just an example of the dog. But in general, as a good open source contribution maintainer, I want to jump in the project, easy to start and then to build, or to understand how to start and then build, right? And that's going to be super important. And then the second is, it's an open source. We want people to just use it. It's like reach to the market and have people to find the project to use and what we're going to do. That's another thing that Filecoin builder is also trying to explore, is how to help our ecosystem, the builders that who build on Filecoin, to expose more of their tools to other people to try to build. And we are trying to looking for a solution that we've been talking about is the builder thing, just trying to have a place that for the Filecoin builders to publish their tools, and then others can just go in and look at how to build. So that's also good suggestion for maintainers to find a place to showcase your project, and can find a way to outreach, to be able to have more people to identify and use your product. But that's all things I can add. Thank you very much for the lesson. That's a great lesson to learn.
I got one more. I'm gonna filibuster real quick. So, the other thing I think we should be doing is developing educational content that is like university level work, right? So I used to work for the Linux Foundation, and I was on a Hyperledger project, but I've been a Linux nerd since the mid 90s. And I distinctly remember, like late 90s, early 2000s, the Linux community developed a university course teaching operating systems using the Linux kernel. And because it was free as in beer, meaning it didn't cost anything, a lot of universities quickly adopted it. I went to the University of Washington, which is in Seattle, which is basically Microsoft land, but I learned operating systems using the Linux kernel because the University of Washington was like, Microsoft didn't give us all this free stuff, but the Linux kernel did, or the Linux project did, and so we're going to all learn this. The net effect was around 2005 to 2010, Linux became the operating system that ran literally everything on the internet, because they educated an entire generation of computer scientists how to build systems using the Linux kernel. We're cutting new paths in technology right now. And so, like, I want to find funding to develop computer networking courseware using libp2p. You know, CS 493 should be peer-to-peer networking, and the entire curriculum is based off of libp2p. And for your capstone project, you have to find a bug in libp2p and fix it, right? And more, or go volunteer in PLDG, you know, and be part of that. I think we could do that with crypto economics and, you know, like distributed engineering or something, right? I think we shouldn't forget that we could shape the world that we want by having more of a longer time outlook. Like, let's teach a whole generation of kids to think in decentralization terms, so that when they are, you know, 25 in industry, they're like, oh, we don't have to submit to corporate control. We could just go and build a distributed data store. And I learned how to do that in college, and I had a summer internship with PLDG, and right? Seriously, I think this is something that we should seriously consider. I don't think that we invest enough in developing, like, even just like educational material. Well, I know we had Launchpad, right? But it's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, like, literally this is university, like, open courseware. Just go look at what MIT does, right? That's what I'm talking about. You got a question?
Real quick, just on a time track, I do have some more questions, but raise your hand if you have a question for any of our panelists. It doesn't have to be related or not. I just want to make sure we end on time. All right, think of questions to ask. Danny, go.
Okay, I'm Danny O'Brien. I'm with the Filecoin Foundation, and I completely resemble that remark, right? Like, I think that I'm in particular, just to connect a couple of things together on that. I think one of the things that the PL network and the Filecoin extended cinematic universe has is also a lot of really cutting edge research. And I think that there was a lot of that was drawn on thinking about distributed computing and peer-to-peer computing in the 2000s. And we just had a little bit of a dip as people spent their time working on centralized platforms. So just connecting that history and bringing in some of that really cutting edge research and many people in our ecosystem are so busy doing the research, they don't have time to teach, right? Or maybe they left academia so they would never have to teach again, right? But we have that opportunity, and with the guild and with our audience, we can really be an educational resource as well. So I just wanted to plus one that.
I completely agree. I'm all in on PLDG University. I already have a lot of thoughts on this. Shocking, I have thoughts on education, and I'm very excited about this. Shashi, go for it.
So I also completely agree on the point he said. Like, we should have videos like for developers. Some developers, they rather than going to doc, they go to videos. I've been saying them with Philby team as well that we should make videos, etc. But one more thing that I would like to put is like in the like that curriculum that we had that we got shared when we came into cohort, as well as the things that we have in Filecoin, like making a universal, like you were saying, like MIT course, making a universal solution like that becomes an issue because things iterate quite fastly. Maybe we make a video or and put it on YouTube so as to how to make a deal, etc. And after a year, we have some changes on that flow. Then that video cannot be updated. We would have to my point is, we cannot put something like MIT course that keeps on keeping relevance even after 10 years. Yeah.
So that is totally right with what you guys are doing, because what you're doing is changing. Like, that is literally all you do every day is like, oh, we're learning, we're changing, we're updating. What I'm talking about are the things that are fairly well baked. So IPFS is fairly well baked. libp2p is fairly well baked. We're doing a lot of research right now just on scaling, but we're not fundamentally changing, these things, right? Like, peer-to-peer networking has been under research for 25 years now. And so, libp2p could be what we teach a university course off of, because it's not going to change that much. A little bit here and there, but not like fundamentally have to redo it every year kind of thing. But as things get better, right, as things get baked and we get years underneath us with experience, you could totally do that. Yeah.
Also, completely agree on that point. One more point that I want to say, having internship programs would also be good thing, because in college usually there is a flow, like people want to get the placement from college, get the internship during their third year, etc. If there is that option in PL or in through cohort, anyway in summer, something like summer internship, that would be a great way to pull more people in and give them some exposure for 3 months, and then can choose to continue in the form of cohort as well. So
yeah, and I want to touch on 2 points here. One is that the fun part of pedagogy and education is actually figuring out, okay, this is going to change. What is the things that are not going to change? What are the key pillars that are just never going to change? And then we can add on and supplement in and out. And I think that's the really fun thing about making educational content personally, but that's separate. And then secondly, your touch on internships as well. PLDG specifically, again, shameless plug here, is designed to start and finish around a lot of university calendars globally. So this includes cohort 2, which is probably going to start in January. And the reason why it's starting in January is because that is when a lot of folks in South America are actually on summer vacation. And so we specifically tried to plan it around not just, say, the US university calendar or the UK university calendar, but the global university calendars as well. Step.
The harks back to something ages ago. The other thing that helped Linux win was, and I was a 93 floppies of Slackware kind of a guy, was Sun completely failed to counter it. And there was a basement full of some workstations in my computer science department, and I could run Unix on a crappy old PC at home.
Can I put a thought or no? We don't have time.
What?
Can I put a thought or no?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So, but just go ahead. Please.
Yeah. So what I saw over the years, like when I was part of Mozilla, then Google Summer of Code, and then Outreachy happened and everything. And the problem there was I met a lot of people from Tier 2, Tier 3. I'm talking about India. And a lot of people they were computer engineering students, but GitHub was not on curriculum, and then open source and everything. Like it was a part, but nobody like taught how to make their first contribution. So people were developers, but they were not sure how first contribution should be made. And Outreachy or other programs that were already ongoing, they were focusing on those people who could actually propose a solution to existing problem they might have in their project. Like for Google Summer of Code, you write a proposal and then you apply. That is where actually I started my own foundation and started a Summer of Code program of my own foundation. Now we impacted around, this year only we got 40,000 registrations from developers across India, and from last 6 years we are running this program and to become a top 3 globally just from India. So we have so many developers in numbers. So I'm trying to say is that there are very minute and basic problems in the onboarding that a lot of programs don't see, which I saw and got trolled massively in early career days. But later, I mean, it became a hit and everybody wants to participate, so much so that this year in the Summer of Code that we ran, we had 17,000 participants, and in the extended version now we have 40,000 developers working right now. So open source is going big, and just identify the minute problems in education and we'll be good to go. So yeah, that's the thought.
You reminded me of something that goes back to the question about what would you tell maintainers. I think it's important to remember that your first contribution or publishing anything publicly that's a direct reflection of your understanding of something takes a great deal of courage. Right. For us who are seasoned at this, we're used to people going, "You suck," right? I mean, you just get creative with emojis, I guess. But I think for someone who's new, it's absolutely terrifying to say, like, they have all the questions, like, is this the correct way to do it? Like, so many projects have coding standards. So many projects have, like, you have to do it this right way. I mean, if you've ever tried to land a patch in Git itself or in the Linux kernel itself, that is an ordeal. I took 9 months getting a patch landed in multi-formats this year. But I think for maintainers to remember that first step, getting your first patch landed, is absolutely terrifying. And then when you see someone submit something that you've never seen before, being willing to say, like, look, we do things a certain way around here. Thank you so much for contributing. Let me teach you how to do this, right? Rather than just being like, nope, denied, right? There's a lot of soft skills that comes with being a really good maintainer that encourages, like, repeat contribution. So anyway, shameless plug for me, part of the AI that we trained this summer was how to coach maintainers on their communication with new contributors.
That's a good one. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I would say for all those maintainers out there, yeah, your first, and even when I contribute to like an like a new project that I've never contributed to before, terrified. I am terrified every single time. So every time I'm scared. And I am a pretty active open source maintainer, and every time. Erin, you have a question?
Go for it. Well, I'll first just say it's always comforting to hear from people that have been in the field for a while that you just don't get to graduate from fear. It's just something that exists. And
you do it anyway.
It gets better. Yeah, all right. You increase in comfort level so you can have sustainability. But anyways, there's comfort in numbers. You guys have already touched on this, and there were plus ones in this room when talking about filling the like education gap that exists. But if we're looking at the phase we're in right now, I'd love to hear from y'all, especially when I'm thinking about what you just mentioned, Katie, about really considering the schedules of those that are at the university level right now. When you're looking at the problems you want to solve today and they're complex and they require a certain level of knowledge within this space that isn't, it might be really accessible, but not everyone's touching it right now. And you still want to like build up and empower and utilize the awesome talent and potential at the university level. How are you effectively, I know there's not a perfect solution to this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to kind of bridge that gap, and at this time, what the expectations are when connecting with devs that are maybe in the earlier stage of their career.
Yeah, I think actually two things to Aaron's point. Great question. One is I am thinking about those university folks and those early career folks. They're actually really great, in my opinion, open maintainers, because they're looking for projects and they're looking for very solvable problems. And a lot of times they want to work on things that we don't always love to work on because we find boring, frankly, right? You want to improve some documentation? That's great. It's been on my to-do list for 9 months. I have never once crossed it out. But the other thing I think about a lot is outside of university, who are we missing? And I've been thinking about this a lot lately with folks that are like retired or a couple years out, who maybe never really got into Web3. You haven't retired yet, but I know you'd be excited about this. And other folks that have a lot of time and maybe have a skill set that we are not necessarily utilizing in our open source communities. And I think about those. That's a question that keeps me up at night. And yes, we are very short on time though. So yeah.
I was just going to say, I just went to my local university. I live in Utah. I went to the University of Utah. I emailed one of the professors and asked to have coffee. And then I told them about all the stuff we're doing in the PLN, and I gave a colloquium just last month about cutting edge decentralization research, and now I have a bunch of grad students bugging me for projects. So literally just go to your neighborhood university and start talking to them, because they are always looking for projects.
We have a couple like SU PhD students right now. We're working in PLBG, and it's funny because you can so tell that like one person got into it and then you're like, hey friends, and that's kind of how it for on the university level.
Yeah, Mike, I completely agree with what you said. Is those folks come in and they really just looking for easy thing to work on. Even me as a FUB team, sometimes I want to contribute on the Lotus. I also looking for the like starter to fix, because that's so complicated, and it requires not just my time but a few people's time to teach me how to do it. And they're like, okay, but by teaching you, we will be able to do that. But at the same time, it's also be easier to just list the other tasks at a different level that like I know what I can pick it up, and also based on my experience, I can just choose something challenging I can do, but not like extremely difficult task. So I feel like most of them are looking for easy tasks, but also challenging ones. So having the task or be easily tackled at a different level, it'd be super helpful for different people to see what they can do.
So yeah, so I'm aware I'm also part of PLDG. So yeah, so I wanted to point out about the internship programs. So we should have internship, because me personally, I'm interested in protocol engineering, the core protocol engineering, but there's no entry point to it, because if you go in Web3 market, everyone's looking for either senior developers or interns who would do work for cheap, right? So there's no learning curve, easy learning curve. Like PLDG is a good starting point to start learning about stuff. Let's say I want to do contribute to Lotus, but where do you start exactly? So PLDG is a good place to do that, like start in. But I think having an internship program with Philos or means something like that with the same incentivization as the PLDG would be a great step ahead, yeah. And also for the college students, the university students, it would be great to say, means it looks good on your LinkedIn, like I intern in Philos, not a open source contributor. I mean, yeah.
All right. Yeah, definitely. PLDG internship coming soon, for sure. Is really what I'm hearing.
I was just going to point out, so like, if you guys met Sakun, who works on GoLib P2P, so Sakun just started showing up. Like, he's just the kid that never went away. And he showed up and he was like, hey, can I fix a bug? And we're like, yeah, that one. And so he fixed it. Can I fix another bug? Yeah, that one. So he fixed that one too. fast forward a year and a half later, Sakun is now the maintainer or one of two maintainers of GoLib P2P, and he works for IP Shipyard, and he's a full-time developer, and he is now doing a lot of cutting-edge scaling research, doing like AutoNav v2 and scaling, Gossip Sub. So it really just, the secret of open source is persistence, right? You can show up, you do something useful, you do it again, you do it again. Before you know it, someone like me will say, congratulations, you're a maintainer.
Now I have a job. Yep. Done. Sometimes. I have one last question for you folks before we head out, but this has been such a great discussion so far. In about 2 years from now, your open source communities, what do you envision for them?
2 minutes. I don't predict. AI open source contributors. What would you like to see in your open source communities?
I would like to see people like me contribute, at the same time be able to like actually earn money, not just like a little money, but be able to easily find a job and then be able to go to like an open source market or whatever, like a job market. You can just do whatever free at working in Chiang Mai and working in Bangkok and be able to like have that like, market. We talk story market, now we're talking about open source market, and then to be able to earn easily on that money. And then get enough fundings to go there support, right? I think funding is also something quite missing for that. We are trying to get PRDG, we're trying to get Retro PGF, and it's all come from PR and the Filecoin Foundation. But is there any more like funding resource rewarded for the contribution from the Filecoin ecosystem, from the wider Web3 ecosystem? Having more fundings coming to incentivize that would be great.
I shouldn't have let you go first. You stole mine. That's okay. I'm just going to echo what he said. I think this is... I've been working on ways to proactively promote the open source software that we're all developing, to find new companies to adopt it, right? Outside of this ecosystem, specifically so that we have a bigger pool of money. That's the business goal that everything I've done with Paper Aviation this year, trying to drive that home, like having the first meaningful improvement in open source community metrics in like 3 decades that I've been involved, right? And then the other part is I do believe it should be possible to be like a journeyman open source developer, which means like that is my career. I'm just an open source developer. Okay. We have done so much work around grants and retro funding, and that's been amazing. But if you've ever tried to make a living doing this, you kind of live hand to mouth, right? It's really tough to have a family, for instance. It's really tough to have a lease on a place because you have to make rent. And so the other thing I've been working on is trying to figure out what value do open source developers offer that companies will pay for. And so I have 2 people that work for me already. The company gets hired to provide like open source community function, right? Like I have seasoned open source developers who sit in their chat rooms, become technical experts. They write blog posts, they write demo code, all this other stuff. And in exchange, I pay them enough to cover like rent and food, right? It's like a universal basic income. So it's proactive funding for open source developers. And I encourage them to automate as much as possible. We're working on automating as much as possible. So it's like a couple hours a week, 5 hours a week, but it's enough that you can cover rent and food, and then you can chase those grants. So you can do real work that gets retro PGF funding. And so I'm working the other side of that problem. And so in 2 years, to answer your question, I would like to see open source developer as a actual career goal. Like that's real. You can come right out of school because you were in PLDG and you started working on some stuff, and then you go over to other open source project, and you can work for somebody like me, like my company, and cover rent and food, and then go after grants and all that other stuff, and not be stuck in the Protocol Labs network, the Filecoin ecosystem, because we've been able to proactively push this technology out from where we are. That's how I want to see it be in 2 years.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, David Longfei. Absolutely phenomenal discussion. Thank you for everyone who asked a question. Aaron, I'm excited to see more commits from you on open source projects. And that's it. Thank you, Flair, so much.